everybody. There's quite a lot of you here. I was not anticipating that, so that's awesome. I'm very happy. I'm just gonna do a quick land acknowledgement, and then I'll just hand it over to Danika. Okay? So I acknowledge that we gather at the Pincher Creek and District Municipal Library on the traditional land of the Piikani people, both past and present. We honor the land itself and the people who have tended to it throughout the generations so that we may continue to work, learn, and play here in the present and into the future. So Danika, I'll leave it to you.
Awesome. First of all, guys, just thank you for coming and thank you for being patient while everything got figured out behind the scenes. That is just the way it goes with technology. But I appreciate your patience. I also am super excited that this is Pincher Creek because, story time, when my great-grandparents came from Sweden, it was actually Beaver Mines was where they actually homesteaded. So I have cousins from Pincher even now, which is just kind of cool. And then of course my family moved to Waterton. So I'm just gonna do sort of a presentation about writing, because I understand you guys are from a class or a high school, is that right? Yes, I'm going to make you interact. You have to like nod or thumbs up something. Yes, yes, good. Sorry, guys. I'm also
just a second, Danika. Sorry to interrupt. Could I ask Carly to because you're just a little icon, so I think Carly has her screen as the speaker right now. So if Carly. If you're here, could you make Danika the speaker, please?
Sam, I think you've been made the host, so I think you've got those controls now, but I'll see if I can do that on my end.
Okay, sorry, I thought that was you. Zoom pains. Okay.
If you go to the view box in the top right corner, it should let you select either speaker or gallery.
Yes, and it's on speaker. Should it be on gallery?
It should be on speaker.
Yeah, it's on speaker, but you're still the main view.
Okay, well, tell you what, I will try logging out and just contact me by email or phone if you run into any issues, and that should solve the problem.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
Did it work?
There we go. Yes, good now. Okay.
Awesome.
Take it over.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm actually a teacher as well, so I'm gonna just kind of tell you some of the stuff that if you were in my class, as my kids were this morning, that I would be sharing with them about writing, and in particular, that writing journey of like, how do you get from being just a person who, you know, just living their life to having lots of books in stores and getting to do presentations. This is awesome because you are not scary to me. I also, a couple of years ago, got to present at New York Comic Con and present at San Diego Comic Con, and to have a room with 1,000 people, that is more stressful. So I'm super excited to be here. So I'm just going to start telling you some stuff about me. I grew up in Southern Alberta, so Lethbridge and Waterton. Like I said, I have family in Pincher Creek, so we used to always come out, in particular in the winter. We did a lot of snowmobiling out there because that's where my aunt and uncle had a farm. When I was in high school, I certainly didn't know that I was going to be a writer. I always thought I was going to be an artist. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but like I do actually still paint. That's part of what I do. But as I grew older, I just found that I had more interest in lots of different ways of expressing myself than just through drawing or painting. And the interesting thing is, when I was at university, I was doing a master's, and I just found I was starting to really hate what I was writing for my master's. And I couldn't make myself passionate. You ever have one of those projects where you just can't keep your enthusiasm? Well, I had one of those projects, which was writing this thesis. And I just needed something fun, because sometimes if you have like a little reward, then you can get through it. And what I started to do was I would write what I had to write for my work at university, and then I just write whatever I wanted. And for me, what my brain wanted to write was fanfic, because that was what I was interested in. And I just wrote the endings to TV shows that I didn't like their ending, I would just fix it. Or if I had a character that I thought was interesting in a movie, but we hadn't really seen them much on screen, I'd write a new story for that character. And it was sort of a way for me to try out writing. And I bet you there's people in this room, and you don't have to say who you are, I don't care. I wrote fanfic for years and years, but it got me writing, and I had an audience of like thousands of people around the world who would follow these stories. And I realized that I was really good at it. Like, I was better at it than I was at painting or drawing or even teaching. I was actually I had a way of doing it. And I decided that rather than just doing it for fun, I was going to make something real of it. So obviously you can't, unless I guess you get hired by a franchise, but usually you can't just write with someone else's characters. So I decided I would write my own characters. And one of the things that I would encourage you to do is think about things that have happened in your life, things that kind of spark an idea, because that will often lead you into a story. So this is where I turn into a teacher. Usually, if you were writing a book or even a short story, you probably have 3 acts to it. So one of my books is usually, each book has 3 main parts. And in Act 1, this is true for movies too, we kind of get introduced to the main characters. We get this call to adventure. That's your initial incident. And it kind of leads us into a whole lot of things that are going to happen, which is Act 2, which is your rising action. The way I describe it for my students is, I take all the terrible things that could happen and I make them from least bad to the most bad. So in like Switchback, so it's 2 students go to Waterton, they're supposed to do a hike, they get separated, and then they're lost in the woods. So what's like the least bad thing that happened? Well, you're trying to use the bathroom and you have no toilet paper. That's gross, but annoying. Not terrible though. And then what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, personally for me, I would hate to have a confrontation with a bear that was angry. And so of course that became the other end. So when you're writing, I would encourage you to think about that rising action as always getting more and more severe. If you can put it that way, you'll keep your readers going. And if you can always leave them wondering at the end of a chapter, they'll keep reading as well. Never leave them totally satisfied at the end of a chapter, make them want to read the next one. And of course, your main character, if it's a developing character, is supposed to be learning from these events, and that all happens in the rising action. I often think of the end part as Act 3. And of course, you remember from school, the whole little witch's hat, that is kind of our plot line. And you all would have learned about it in grade 3 and then probably every year since. So Act 3 is really that climax, which is your turning point, usually the highest point of action, but not always. But fate always turns for or against your main character. And that's where you have like the last stand, you have the boss fight, you have the big event that's going to change things. And then you bring your characters back to the world changed. And that's really the same for any short story that you guys might be writing as it is in a novel. It's just longer, and it really is exactly the same. It's this nice structure that we all get used to and we come to expect it. So for me, I decided it was time to move from writing some fanfic to actually writing my own stories. And what I would often do is whenever I had spare time, this is actually one of my older books, is I would just write wherever I was. So at that time I had little kids. And so if I was at the swimming pool, I would just sit and write while the kids were doing swimming lessons. For you guys, I would encourage you, write on your phone. I do that all the time now, not when I'm driving, obviously, but like if I'm just, I don't know, doing something and I'm having coffee and I all of a sudden think, oh, that would be a great idea. Just write it into your phone or record it so you don't lose it, because it's amazing how many great ideas you get. And if you don't write them down, they're gone. I even have a thing in my shower. It's called shower notes. That sounds so weird. It's actually this water repellent paper and there's a pencil right there. So if I got the best idea for writing ever in a shower, I could totally write it down. Because the purpose, of course, is to get that draft written. One of the things I've noticed over the years is that there's a lot of people who say they want to be a writer or that they're an aspiring writer, but they don't follow through and actually do it. And I think the biggest thing that I would say to you guys, and this is something I say to my own students, a lot of it is just getting your butt in the chair and forcing the words out. Because once you start getting the words out, it's amazing how your brain sort of takes over and goes. So for instance, if I have a student who's really struggling getting started, like, I don't know, essays are always hard. And they're saying, I can't do it. I will often just say, well, I'm going to scribe for you for a minute and I'll start typing. And they're like saying, this is the dumbest project ever. And I'm typing, this is the dumbest project ever. Wait, don't do that. That's not what I meant to say. And I'm typing that too. Honestly, if you can start getting the words going, you can always come back and you can edit them. But if there's nothing there, there's nothing to fix or edit. So I would encourage you to write all the time. And if you're not writing, I want you to read. And if you're not reading, then get out and live, actually do some stuff that would make a good story. Because a lot of the stories that I write are based literally on things that I know, or I've heard about, or I've experienced. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So as I mentioned, I was a fangirl. Still am. So I became friends with a girl named Erin when we were both fangirling like the MCU. And when they killed off Agent Coulson, sorry, that's old spoilers from a million years ago, she was like furious. And she actually started this campaign to bring him back from the dead called Coulson Lives. And I remember Erin and I got together, we were at a convention, I think it was Dragon Con. And I said to Erin, I love that idea as a book, you should actually write that. And Erin was like, I will never write that, but Danika, you should. And that literally became All the Feels. Now, is it about Erin? No. Erin works, she's a lawyer in the States. She's got this big higher powered job. That's not what I wanted to write. I wanted to write about someone who was just out of high school. And what would that experience be like if you had this character that you loved and you lost them? So that's where your own experiences come in. Switch back. So as I mentioned, my family is from Waterton. So a cousin of mine who actually grew up there, he was out with his parents near Twin Lake, and he literally just ended up getting turned around on the trail and he walked almost to BC. He just didn't know he was going the wrong way. And it wasn't until the sun was changing where it was in the sky and he realized, I don't think I'm in Waterton. So if that could happen to a kid who grew up there, what happens if you take two city kids and you throw them into that situation? One of whom is a gamer. I love that idea. Internet famous. So obviously, if I'm spending lots of time online, you inevitably are going to run across trolls. You just do. That's what internet famous was about. So this idea of getting harassed and how do you find someone who's hiding basically in plain sight online. And then of course, now these ones are my thriller titles, because I also write them, not just young adult, that would be about Waterton. So all the creepy stories I've heard about Waterton, can I put those into a story? So that's really how I start writing. So I want you to think for a second, something that's happened to you. Maybe it's like, I don't know, everybody has like a good creepy story about, well, one time my friends and I were walking home and we were going by the graveyard and we swore we saw something. Everybody has a story like that. That story, whatever is different for you, is a story that might interest other people in reading, and you would have a way of writing about it that no one else would, because you are the person who knows that story. You're the one who knows that experience, especially if it's something that not a lot of people have experienced themselves. So if you're, I'm just trying to think of like an example. If you're in a community that not a lot of people know about, like, I'll be honest, I haven't read a ton of stories about rural communities. A lot of them just take place in cities. Well, write what you know, write about it, tell me about it. What is that experience like? And it's amazing how you can actually find your voice in there. So for instance, Waterton is like a town of like 200 people. When I wrote the books, I emailed, like not just emailed, but I also wrote letters to everyone because not everybody has email, and just said, by the way, I wrote this book, please don't hate me. It's not about you, but it's because I knew the town. When I wrote Switchback, being in the mountains, like that was something I experienced as a kid all the time. My parents always took us on these, we always called them torture hikes. But it's whatever you understand and you know, that's your foot in the door. And then becomes the process of actually writing it. So people always ask me, okay, so how do you go from having all these scribbles in a book? How do you go from that to you've got a finished copy and it's bound and it's in stores? And there's a very specific process, but it's really boring, so I'll just speed it up. So you write the book. And that makes it sound easy, but it probably is about the easiest part. Find some friends who you can trust, and you ask them to be what I call my alpha readers. They're the first people. They are not going to make you hate it. Don't ask your mom. Your mom is going to correct all your grammar. That's not what you want. You want someone who actually is going to be like, yeah, that's an awesome story. I love it, and make you enthusiastic. Get your friends to read it, and they will tell you what parts don't work, but have to be friends, because then you'll feel comfortable enough to take that critique. So then I get it back and I rewrite the parts that more than one person noted had issues. And it's funny, it's like different people pick up on different things. Doesn't mean you have to change it, but if you see 4 of your friends are all like, I can't stand this character, you should maybe work on that character. Once that's done, you've got it all rewritten, you send it out to the next group. This might be your mom. This might be your English teacher, okay? This is someone who you're a little bit nervous of their feedback, and you get back from them their replies. And again, same thing, I wouldn't make any changes unless there was more than one person saying the same thing. And then when it's all polished up, I usually give it a month, and then I go back and clean up all of the errors in grammar. For myself, I am very much an auditory learner. My students, when I mark their stuff, they love this because it means that if I'm rushing, I'll miss errors and I won't see if they misspelled things, but I can catch things if I hear it. So for me, I actually will listen. I'll either have someone read the entire thing to me, which I know takes a long time, or I'll listen on Word. You actually have a reader on the more updated Word. You can usually get a reader for that. And I have a reader on my computer and I listen. Okay, so now you've got like a nice polished, shiny book. Is it ready for stores? No, not even close. The next step is you need an agent, because although there are ways to get stuff in bookstores, just sending it out, it's pretty rare. Like, honestly, you probably have a better chance of winning the lottery. So the best thing to do is get someone who's got an in, and that's an agent. So you write them a letter, say, I wrote the best book ever. It's going to make you millions and millions of dollars. Please, will you represent me? And that's actually not what you write, but essentially that's what it is. And you tell them a little bit about the book. And they then, if they choose to sign you, try to sell it to a publisher. So there are 5 big publishers in the world. It's kind of crazy. There's lots of small ones, but there's 5 big ones. And traditionally, the biggest books that get the most promotions are the ones that go through them. So your agent hopefully will find a home for your book, but honestly, even if they don't at a big publisher, so these ones for me, my young and 5, but still, even if they don't find a house for your books there, Stonehouse is an Alberta press. So there are smaller ones out there, but in the end, the idea is you sell it and then a publisher will go through and do the process of putting it together. And they're going to make you edit again. When I'm teaching essay writing with my students and I'm making them rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and my kids are complaining because I would not expect less of them, I always take out my edit letter for switchback because it's about 10 pages long and it ends with, we don't like the character of blank, I won't even say who it is, rewrite him, make him a new character. And I realized they wanted me to rewrite half the book. They would buy it, but they wanted half the book rewritten. And literally, I think it was like 2018, that's what I did over Christmas, is I just sat there and rewrote half a novel over Christmas and ignored my kids because I wanted to sell it. Because when we get as authors to a point that we're putting stuff out in the world, it's no longer the story I want to tell, it's the story that will sell. And my editor, Holly, was absolutely right. That's what needed to change. And as soon as I started writing Ash, who is the character, I just stole him from another book that I had half written, then everything worked. And that's actually where Ash came in, and it just made everything so much more funny to have this guy who was a gamer and had no idea how to manage in the woods being out there. So that's where your book goes from there. It's all about promotions. If you are lucky and you have a really big press representing you, you get to go around the world and have book launches and stuff like that. And if you have a small press, you probably have smaller ones or you put them on yourself. But either way, it is really, really fun. It honestly is. Like I've just totally had a blast doing it, and I have no intention of stopping. Do I still teach? Yes, because I also love that, but it's really fun to be a writer. So one of the things, I'm looking at my time, I think I'm pretty good, that I wanted to do is I'm going to read a little bit of Switchback for you, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about writing, and then I'm going to give you guys a chance for questions. I'm sure your teacher, if they made you come here, is probably going to make you ask questions. So you can think of questions, so I don't have to just go person in the white sweatshirt and like pick you out, because I totally would do that as a teacher, but that's kind of me. All right, so relax for a moment and I will try to focus. And I'm going to do a little bit of reading. They've been lost for about 2 days. So they've already spent one night kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They're now set up. They've made a little shelter underneath a tree. They brought all these little boughs of branches and kind of made a bit of a shelter. It's snowed on them. It's pretty cold. And these 2 best friends, Ash and Vale, are kind of holed up for the night. They're ready to try to sleep. And Ash, of course, being a teenage boy, is extremely, extremely hungry. So that's where we're picking up. They're camped for the night. It took what felt like ages before Ash finally slept. Twice, he took out his phone. Each time there was no reception, so he turned it off again. 16%, even on low power mode, was barely enough to last for the length of a phone call. And that was only if he could get enough reception to call for help. I need to get up high again. The trouble was, Vale's twisted ankle was going to make climbing impossible. He frowned down at the girl who slept at his side. In the dim glow of the light stick, the last one that Vale had, he could see the stress that the experience was putting on her. Vale's face was drawn, her cheeks hollowed out, lips pinched. She looked hurt, and that bothered him. Vale was Ash's best friend, and right now she was doing more for their survival than he was. It's not like I can hunt for food or something. At the thought of food, Ash's stomach let out a low rumble of protest. Images of his mother's homemade mansaf, leg of lamb, on top of marcouk bread and roasted vegetables hung in the air before him, enticing him with their imagined taste. The last piece of gum was long gone, nothing left to distract him from the hunger pains that tortured him. Stomach aching, Ash squirmed uncomfortably as he waited for sleep to take hold. Just stop thinking about food. It was a Herculean task, but eventually he forced himself to focus on the sounds around the lean-to. He categorized them: bird, rodent, crinkle of the emergency blanket, wind in the trees. Slowly, his body relaxed. Vale's warmth, a welcome comfort. His lids fluttered closed as moments from today flickered in a random montage. Him and Vale climbing the mountain, the snowball fight, Ash stomping the snow and the cornice giving way, grabbing Vale's hand as they ran from the avalanche. Vale seeing the lake in the valley, the hike down, the animal in the darkness. Helping Vale with her twisted ankle, the carpenter ants in the stump, Vale in the shelter, and him taking his place beside her. Sometime later, Ash woke in the dark, his heart pounding. What was that? He opened his eyes, taking in the faint green glow of the light stick and Vale, a warm bundle in front of him, and the opening of the lean-to with the fire down to embers a stone's throw away. Ash was warm, surprisingly so. In fact, he felt the way he'd felt that long ago night when he had fallen asleep in the doghouse. It was almost like he was nestled between two. Ash's breath caught. Oh crap, there's something lying right behind me. Terrified, his senses stretched out into the shadows. Ash could feel the branches of the lean-to, but against the narrow barrier of them, something else lay. It was large and warm. He could feel its slow breath rise and fall. Panic rose like a wave in him. It's lying next to me. It's just outside. The animal that Vale heard in the forest is here. Whatever it was, it felt big. With trembling fingers, Ash reached back over his shoulder. He brushed aside the pine needles and branches that formed the shelter's wall. He held his breath and pushed farther, farther. He touched stiff fur. Ash jerked his hand back so fast he smacked Vale in the back of the head with his elbow. She made a snuffling sound and turned her head. What are you? Ash pressed his hand against her mouth. Vale's eyes widened in shock. Outside, he mouthed. Vale shook her head in confusion. What? Ash let go of her mouth and leaned in until his lips were directly against her ear. The animal you heard is outside, he hissed. He felt her stiffen. A bear? I think so. It's on the other side of the shelter, leaning on me. And that's how I would end a chapter, and did end a chapter, because then it makes your readers not go to bed, but actually go to the next chapter. And then, of course, once you start reading, you should really just read the next chapter as well. All right, let's see. I had a list of 10 things I wanted to tell you guys about writing. I just need to find my notes. There's a picture of Switchback. You'll have to trust me that there was a lovely video and everything else, but we're going to go through it. Here's my helpful hints for writing. My first hint is write for yourself, write regularly. Everything else follows. My students in my class, we write every single day. I just get like crazy prompts. Sometimes they're pictures, sometimes they're just like a, what if you woke up and everything was upside down? And then you just like write from there. It's a muscle. And one of the things I always say to my students, because I have a lot of students who are in hockey, you wouldn't expect yourself to be able to skate really, really good the first time you put on skates. You won't write really well the first time you start writing. So keep that in mind. It's practice. My second hint, anything can be your inspiration. There's no rules. So just trust your gut and write it. My third hint, figure out your challenge areas. And you probably have a sense of what they are. It's the thing that your teacher always says, next time, can you work on whatever that is? Maybe it's sentence structure. Maybe for you, you switch tenses all the time, whatever it is. Learn to fix those things, because every time you learn and polish it, you get just a little bit better. I actually have a list of them for myself, and I go through it before I send it to alpha readers. My fourth hint, I already said, if you're making a story and you want to build the tension, you want people to be scared, list all the points that you want to include and make them get worse as you go up that rising action. That's your plot line. My fifth hint, everyone edits. No one, not even Stephen King, who writes like a couple books a year and is like probably the fastest writer ever. No one gets it right the first time, ever. And I wish we would stop pretending that you do. Oh my gosh, guys, I rewrote half of that book. That's like 35,000 words. That's like 35 essays. And I did it because that's the way writing works. So please just get used to that idea. That's how we get really good at it. Also, everyone wants to give up. Sometimes you have to keep going. And the truth is, very few people jump from I want to write a book to I wrote a book because they let themselves down by stopping. If you haven't stopped, you're still a success, even if it's not going to be published. And that kind of goes to hint 7. Finished is better than perfect. So stop polishing and polishing and polishing and just finish it. Stop saying, well, I'm not in the perfect mood to write. Finish it. Get your stuff done. Hint number 8, it's okay to write a terrible first draft. You just need to learn to edit beautifully. And the truth is, and this is not my saying, this is from Jodi Picoult, you can't edit a blank page. And that's the truth. So if you write it, even if it's garbage, you can fix it. But if there's nothing there, there's nothing to fix. Hint number 9, writers are readers. So if you don't like reading, you just haven't found the right book yet. And I say that honestly, check out graphic novels. There are some amazing graphic novels that might just spark reading for you if you're not right now finding that you have something that you want to read. Keep looking. There's a book out there for you, but you might have to ask a librarian to help you find it. And if you hate it, the one that you try, don't force yourself to keep reading unless it's for school and you have to. Try a different one, try another one. Find something that fits for you, because if you want to be a writer, you have to read, and a lot. Hint number 10, no one is an expert at writing. You practice and you keep practicing, and that is it. That is the only trick. So every book that you write gets a little bit better because you are better as a writer. So that is my kind of main presentation, and I'm good for time. My last thing I want to say to you guys before I force you to ask questions is you are the best person to tell the story, your story, and that's your strength. So whatever you want to write, you're going to just take those ideas and start writing. All right, so that is my main kind of presentation part. You guys were awesome. That was like 40 minutes. So who's got questions? I don't know if you can access the chat just with your phones. You could totally put them there. I wouldn't even know who you were. Who's got questions for me? And you'll have to shout them so I can hear them from the computer's audio. I love how everyone's like, I am just looking at this carpet. It is very interesting carpet. In my class, I have a jar and it's full of popsicle sticks and every kid's name is on it. I don't even ask who wants to answer questions. That's how we do discussions, because really it should be everybody asks something. So does anybody have a question, or else I'll just start answering things that I think people usually ask me as an author. Any questions, guys? I can vaguely hear someone needs to come up and shout right at the computer.
I do have a question.
Okay.
What motivated you to start writing in the first place?
So I was at university and honestly, I wanted to quit. So I had all of this time and all these courses in, and I literally hated it. I am not kidding. I remember laying on the bed and I was just like, I hate this. I want to die. And it's okay. I'm very dramatic, as you can probably tell. But I needed something that gave me joy. And for me, inventing things always just made me happy. So I don't know for everyone if that's the case, but for me, because it wasn't for a class, because I hated what I was writing for my classes. It was just for me, and I didn't have to show it to anyone. It kind of made it more like a fun thing. So if you think about a TV show that you've ever watched and you got to the ending and you were like, oh, I'm so annoyed. Like if you watched Game of Thrones and you hated the last season, what would you have done? Well, for me, the carrot was, I just wanted to write what I would have done better. And I'll be honest, that seems kind of rude, but really, sometimes there's TV shows and their endings are garbage and I could do a better job. And it was just fun for me. And that's what sort of got me going, is this idea that I could just let my brain play. It's the same reason I paint. It's the same reason I just hike. I like doing things where it's just my mind is free. That was a good question, by the way. I'd give you an A for that question. Any other questions?
I got a question.
Sure.
Do you have any tips for like essay writing?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I wish I could present my screen. I'd totally pull up what I teach my kids. Big Macs. That's going to be the way you're going to remember it. Okay. So your introduction is the top bun. Nobody wants to touch a Big Mac when it like right into the gooey part. That's disgusting, right? So you need that bun. The bun on top is almost exactly the same as the bun on the bottom, just a little bit smaller, right? Your intro and conclusion are the same thing, except the conclusion is smaller. That's my first hint. And then of course you have those three patties. Those are your body. You're going to, put all the stuff in there that you want people to read. And the kind of glue between them, the special sauce, the lettuce, is that transitional phrases, those ideas that lead from one paragraph to another. So really, I honestly give my students a planning page that looks like an empty Big Mac. And the first couple times we do essays, we plan it that way, because I know it sounds dumb, but if you get in an exam and you have to write an essay, say in grade 12, and you're panicking, if you can just remember the stupid Big Mac analogy, you've got the structure, and that will pass you. Doesn't mean you're going to get 100, but if you can follow that structure, you're good. So that's my 1 minute, 2 minute on how to write an essay.
Do you do commissions?
Sorry, say again.
Do you do essay commissions?
I'm missing the second word. Do I do essay which?
Commissions.
Commission. I don't know what I think I might be missing a word. Sorry, someone needs to come close to the screen and just shout at me. I'm just having a hard time hearing people far away.
Sorry, do you do essay commissions? Like if we send you the general idea.
Yeah, we could do that. No, I'm kidding, of course. However, what you should tell your teacher to do this. I don't know who your teacher is, but I actually do this with my students. When I assign them their first essay and everybody's like, we're gonna die. And I'm like, you're not gonna die. We write the first one together. Cause like I can write extremely fast, not as fast as I can talk, but pretty close. So I have the class talk it out. It's like, okay, here's the top bun. So we need to tell people where we're going with this, right? We're gonna have 3 main points. Don't explain them, just say what's gonna happen. So the students, we do our thesis, and I'm just typing and they talk it out. The whole class is just shouting at me and we do an essay together. It's like, okay, body paragraph, here's your topic. You already said what it was, defend it. And everybody's shouting things. I find when we do it that way, if you can convince your teacher to be the scribe for your class, honestly, it's not as scary once you've done it once. So everybody kind of comes together. I think a lot of times, because I hated doing essays when I was in school, but once you realize like really there's just a structure to them. Just like if you were in social, there's a structure to position papers. Once you know the structure, it becomes really easy to write them. Honestly, it really does. Just the same as once you know the structure of how to write a book, it's not scary anymore. It's when you don't know how things fit, then it is kind of scary. So ask your teacher to do that. That would be good. Other questions?
What inspires you to start writing something new?
Oh, okay. So there's like a couple things. The first one is just like the boring answer. My editor is like, Danika, we would like another young adult book, and we feel like it needs to move away from internet culture. And I was like, sure, like what? And they're like, don't you live in a place where there's like no people? And I'm like, yes, I do. And they're like, write about that. Honestly, that's sometimes how it starts. But sometimes it's just that my head, my brain wants to play. So you ever have one of those dreams where you wake up and you're just like, that was crazy? Well, I do too, but I will often just write down the premise. And not every premise works, because sometimes your brain is just doing weird stuff while you're asleep. But sometimes there's a really interesting premise. So last summer, I was burned out because I had taught online all year, just COVID and everything like that. I wasn't in a classroom, and that's really stressful. And I just decided I was going to let my brain play. So the premise was, what if you had two students at a university and they met each other through like a reply all chain? Because that was like the bane of my existence when I was online. Everybody forgets that there's just, you can reply to one, not to everyone. So I started writing the book, and it was these two students, they were writing to each other. And as I started writing, it started to get creepy. So this boy, Eli, I just got a sense like, what is wrong with this kid? But instead of trying to figure it out, I was just like, brain, go to. And what I discovered is that the main character, Brooklyn, was writing from the present day, but she was writing to someone who had died in 2007. And it was just some weird internet thing. Now, does that make sense? No, but I wrote a whole book that way, and I just got a second agent. So obviously it did work. So she's trying to sell that book now. So for me, a lot of times it isn't just like, hey, let's plan it out. There's nothing wrong with those books. Like, which one? Internet Famous, like my editor just told me, this is what I think you should write next, and I did. But sometimes it's just having fun with it. And really it comes down to what if? What if there was a serial killer in Waterton? That's this book. What if your favorite character got killed and you just were like, no, I'm bringing him back from the dead? That's this book. So you just kind of take that idea and let your brain run with it. And you know what? I always find for myself, because a lot of people are like, oh, I wrote and I got to 20,000 words and then I just kind of couldn't get any further. I was stuck. I often get stuck, but I just leave myself a note, which is like, something happens and now there's bad guys in the building. I think that was one of the notes for this one. And then I had to come back and write that scene and figure out how the bad guys got in there and took over the building. But I did aspire to write. That's a good question too. All right, next one, if any. I'm watching the time here. You guys are much quieter than my students are. Mind you, also in my classroom, I'm like, I have to walk because I have a lot of energy. So I'd probably be walking around behind you, which always like throws people off. Come on, guys, what's a really good question? Why am I still a teacher? Because you don't make that much money when you're a writer. Some people do. If I was Stephen King, I would. But most writers actually almost always have another job that keeps things stable. So do you make a big chunk of money when you sell a book? Yes, you do. But it's hard to plan a life around, like, what if there's 3 years between selling books? That's always something I feel like people should know. So I would say, make sure you have another career that allows you time. I write in my summers. That's actually when most of my books get written. Other stuff I get asked. How do you write with kids? Well, you kind of ignore them sometimes. My kids are older, like my kids are actually teenagers now, so it's a little bit easier to ignore them. I never wrote anything when my kids were little because like they never gave me a chance to write. I'm trying to think, what else do I get asked? What's my favorite part of being a writer? Well, I love writing. I hate editing. So when your teacher makes you edit, I feel your pain. I don't love it. I love traveling to different places in the world. I got to go to Book Expo, New York, and it was one of the highlights of my life. Like, honestly, it was really cool. So there's some really big perks to being a writer as well. It is pretty fun. All right, those are the ones I usually get asked. Anyone else? I love how everybody's like looking at the next person. You ask something. It's up to you. You don't have to. I won't force you.
If there's no more questions, no? Okay, well, I'll say I'll come here so you can see me. I'll say thank you, Danika, for coming and talking about being a writer and just sharing your knowledge. And
Thank you.
to all of you guys for showing up. This was awesome.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
It was a very good turnout. So, yes, and thank you for coming, even though it's through Zoom, you know?
That's all good.
Yes. So, I guess that's the end of it. So,
Yeah.
I will sign off now, but thank you again. And we really enjoyed it. So.
Thank you so much for coming, guys. And I do hope I get to chat with you in person sometimes. And I think that would be really fun. Thank you for the invitation as well. See you later, guys.
Bye.
See ya.